All right. Welcome those who have joined into the webinar today. We're going to give everyone just a few minutes to join in and get themselves set up and ready to go. So as people start coming in, we'll wait on them for just another minute or two, and then we'll go ahead and get started. All right. Again, welcome everyone who's joining into the webinar. We're just waiting another minute or two so that everybody has a chance to get in before we kick things off. So sit tight for just a little bit, and I'll let you know when we're ready to get moving here. Okay, great. I think we've got most of the group. Some other people might join in, but we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome everybody to the webinar today. My name is Ryan. I'm going to be your moderator. I have the privilege of being joined by Dr. Ann DePaulo-Wietzma, as well as Dr. Dunsham, the head of audiology here at Whisper. Before we go ahead and get into the presentation, I just have one quick housekeeping item that I want to cover. We're going to have a Q&A session at the end of the presentation today, but I do encourage everybody to ask questions. Go ahead and use that Q&A box that you'll see there at the bottom of your Zoom interface. You can type your question in at any time throughout the presentation, and then once we finish that, we'll jump into Q&A. I'll read the questions aloud, and we'll make sure we get those questions answered for everyone. All right, so with that, I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to Dr. Ann.
Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the webinar. I think I know most of you, but for those who I don't, my name is Dr. Ann DePaulo-Wietzma. I am the owner and audiologist here at the Audiology offices. I am joined by a staff of other providers, audiologist Kim Stout and hearing specialist Janie Anderson. We have been providing audiology and hearing health care to the residents of the Northern Neck and Middle Peninsula since 2001. Our office locations are in Kilmarnock, Gloucester, and Warsaw, Virginia. I'm very excited that you are with us today. I became introduced to the Whisper hearing system last summer. And just like you're attending this webinar, I attended a webinar to learn more about this cutting edge technology. I was very intrigued by the concept of artificial intelligence being used in the hearing industry. What impressed me more so was that the product was researched and developed by software engineers and specialists in the field of artificial intelligence. I have been in the hearing industry for a very long time, including 15 years working with a major US hearing aid manufacturer. So I have seen many hearing aids been developed and designed, which have been wonderful for all the patients across the country. But I was most impressed with this software system, this artificial learning machine that could actually get better over time. So it's very important to me that as an audiologist in our community, that we keep current with technology and have a wide variety of products available to all our staff. So in August of last year, I did my first fitting of the Whisper hearing system. My first patient that I fit was a fourth grade teacher, and her complaint was very typical of first-time users. She had difficulty hearing soft speakers, and especially with COVID and the children and everyone having to wear masks, she was finding a lot of difficulty in being able to understand the students. When we did the fitting with the Whisper, she immediately noticed how natural her voice was. And for someone who's worked in the industry for as long as I have, for a first time user, getting used to their own voice is something that's usually, um, it usually takes a little bit of time to get used to it because the voice may sound a little echoey or a little bit like a tunnel. And I was quite impressed that it was so natural. And needless to say, our fitting went very successful. She came back after a couple weeks of being in the classroom and noted how natural the sound was and how pleased she was with the ability to understand the other teachers, parents, and the students. So that was my first success story, and I have had many more over the past year. I have fit both current users and new users. I'm very excited about this technology. And with no further ado, I'm going to turn it over to Don, who's going to teach us everything we need to know about the Whisper.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wietzma. My name is Don Chum. I'm the head of audiology at Whisper. I am also an audiologist. I've been in this field for well over 30 years. I've always been a hearing aid person both as a researcher and a clinician and as a university teacher. The last 26 years, though, I've spent inside the hearing aid industry, and that's been a lot of fun for me as a person who spent a lot of time fitting hearing aids up to that point in time to see it from the other side, to see what the process is of actually bringing care to individuals like yourselves, and see how hearing aids are developed and put together, and then be part of helping get the word out there. So I'm pleased that you're willing to join us today, and I want to talk a little bit about what we're up to at Whisper. So there's two basic aspects about the Whisper hearing system that I do want to talk about today. One is the fact that it's a learning system, meaning that it's designed to be able to get better over time, meaning that the product you get today is not the same product you're going to have a few months down the road as we continue to add new and better software to the product, and that it'll continue to get better and better over time for patients who invest in a system. The second aspect that I want to talk about is that we lean heavily into the technology of artificial intelligence in order to do the sound processing that patients with hearing loss really need in order to perform well. And I'll talk about how we go about doing that and why it's such an important part of the product. So let's go ahead and get started. Many of you out there are already wearing hearing aids, I would guess. Some of you may not be wearing hearing aids yet, but you're considering the idea of getting hearing aids. And when adults acquire hearing loss, as you know, as adults, oftentimes it's the sort of thing that doesn't happen very quickly. It happens gradually over a number of years. That's the classic pattern of patients when they develop hearing loss. And at first, sometimes you're not even aware that's a hearing loss. Then eventually you become aware that it's probably a hearing loss that you're dealing with. But that doesn't mean that you immediately take action. You gather information, you think about it, you talk to other people who have hearing aids or have thought about hearing aids. You start to try to put the puzzle pieces together to decide what is the right direction for yourself. But then at some point in time, you finally make that decision that yes, you feel ready to become a hearing aid user. And we believe that three things are on people's minds when that happens. First of all, given that they have spent a good deal of time researching the topic and talking to other people and really trying to figure out what the best idea is, usually patients really are of the mindset that as long as I'm going to do this, I might as well start with very good technology. I take it seriously. This is my hearing, this is my health. I want to make sure that I'm not shortcutting myself, that I'm doing it the right way. Part of doing it the right way, we also realize, is working with the right people to do it. And the fact that you're within the University of Dr. Wietzma's clinic, then that shows that you're very interested in getting your healthcare, your hearing healthcare, from an excellent professional like yourself. But the third aspect that is maybe not so much immediately on your mind, but maybe is even an assumption that you have, is that you want to keep up to date. In other words, you want to make sure that if you're going to make an investment in hearing care, that you're making a good investment now, but you're also making a good investment that'll last into the future. The problem is traditionally the way hearing aids have worked, the hearing aids don't get better over time. In other words, you could buy the best hearing aid you can possibly get your hands on today, but that's going to be exactly the same hearing aid 4 or 5 years down the road before you get to the point of trying to get your next set of hearing aids. And most people don't replace their hearing aids until, like I said, 4, 5, 6, 7 years down the road. And that hearing aid that you have at that point in time is the exact same hearing aid that you had when you purchased the device back several years ago. And so the problem is that a performance gap can start to build up, meaning that there's a difference between what the state of the art of sound processing is today and what your current hearing aid is doing, even if your current hearing aid was state of the art 4 years ago. And the way we thought about it at Whisper is that that doesn't really have to be the way it is. Because one of the things we know is that modern consumer electronic devices are designed to get better over time. And the best example that I can give you is your smartphone. You know, almost everybody has a smartphone. And the thing is, everyone's smartphone is a little bit different because of the software that you put on it, meaning the apps that you put on it. You start with a piece of hardware, and that piece of hardware has to be excellent. But then you go through the process of trying to make it a better and better and better device for yourself, meaning that you put on the apps that you're most interested in, where you want to get your news feed, where you want to get your weather reports, where you want to get your sports information, or whatever it is that you're interested in, what games you want to play. You do that, you customize your product based on the software that you put on it. And then when you put those apps on it, they themselves get better over time, and they will send to you a new version of an app as they've learned to improve it over time. So because modern consumer electronics are software based, they can improve over time. You can update the software that's on it. The smartphones have been around for a while now doing that sort of thing. One of the things that you may have noticed that is, one type of device that's starting to do the same sort of thing are smart televisions. Used to be you turn on your television, you get the channel guide, and you can watch live TV, or maybe you watch something that you stored on your DVR. But these days, when you turn on your television, at least in a lot of places, the first thing you see is a screen with a lot of apps. Do you want to watch Netflix now? Do you want to watch Prime Video, or get your news or your sports from somewhere else? And it doesn't necessarily have to be live TV that you're watching. And that's just the sort of thing that happens when you are using a smart device like that. One of the most recent examples in this area is the idea of smart exercise machines. And probably the best example of that is the Peloton company. The Peloton company is, if you're not aware, they make exercise bicycles and other devices. And what they do is they've created a whole universe around it. They took a piece of hardware that has been around for decades, an exercise bicycle. They made a very good version of an exercise bicycle. But the thing that really sets them apart as a company is this universe that they created around, that you can take classes with other people riding in real time, or you can ride on different courses that you want to ride. If you want to ride in the Rocky Mountains, or you want to ride down the Delaware River Valley, or whatever it is you want to ride, you can do that based on the software that you can put on your machine. These machines will monitor your heart rate and your progress towards goals and things like that. And it's all about, because modern electronic devices are designed to work that way. At Whisper, we had very much the same idea. When Whisper was founded, it was founded on a couple of core principles. And one of the core principles is that they would be software-based devices. And these software-based devices by design will be improved over time. And so we have something called our upgrade program, where over time we put new information, new sound processing ideas, updates to our older ideas on your devices every few months, in order to make sure that we're trying to keep you up to date all the time. Because the one thing that we don't want to happen is this performance gap to build up. So if you keep your Whisper devices for 3, 4, 5 years, we want to make sure that the sound processing on the Whisper devices are always as up to date as they possibly can. And that's the nature of the way we've designed the product. And it's a core part of the way we go ahead and arrange ourselves as a company to make sure that we're doing these upgrades all the time. Whisper has been in the marketplace now for about 16, 17 months. And we're just releasing next week our 5th upgrade to our first generation of products. Means that if you bought a Whisper system back in October of 2020, you would now be getting your 6th version of the Whisper system at no charge to you. You know, it's the same hardware that you have, but the sound processing on that hardware has been updated, and this will be the 5th time that we've updated it. And so that is just the way modern technology works, but we're the only company in the hearing aid space that really thinks about it that way and goes ahead and does these sound processing updates on a regular basis. It's important to understand then what it is that we're trying to do with the hearing aid and what it is that we think is very important for users like yourselves. There are 2 really basic jobs that a hearing aid has to do. One is that it has to make sound louder. If you've developed hearing loss over the years, what you notice is that there are just some sounds that you just don't hear as well as you used to. Typically soft sounds, sometimes the higher pitched sounds, you just don't hear as well. So one of the jobs of a hearing aid is to make sure that we can amplify sound enough so you can hear it. But that's a pretty straightforward process. We understand that as an industry, we understand that pretty well. But the second big thing that a hearing aid has to do is to help patients when they go in more challenging environments, noisier environments, busier environments. Because the nature of hearing loss is that when you develop hearing loss, one of the skills that gets eroded because of the changes in the way your inner ear works is your ability to be in noisy environments and be able to hear effectively. It's not about what you're not hearing. It's oftentimes it feels like you're hearing too much all the time because your ear just can't do a good job of processing all that sound. And so the second big job of a hearing aid is to do everything possible to try to clean up the noise in the signal and only present to you the most important parts of the signal so that you can hear and understand better. The problem is that the traditional ways to do that in hearing aids have somewhat reached a limit over the last few years where we're coming up with brand new ideas. And so that's why we really have decided as a company, we wanted to find a different way to try to attack those problems. And so one of the core ideas that we decided to go with was the idea of using artificial intelligence. Now, I want to talk about artificial intelligence for a few moments because artificial intelligence can mean a lot of different things. Artificial intelligence shows up in everyday life in very different things. If you ever talk to your phone, you ask Siri to dial a phone number, or you ask Siri to look something up on Google or whatever, that's using artificial intelligence. If you have any programmable devices in your house, oftentimes those are using artificial intelligence. Certainly, anytime you do online shopping, that's all about using artificial intelligence in order to hone in on the sort of things that you're most interested in purchasing as a consumer. But artificial intelligence is used in other ways in everyday life, and probably ways that people don't really realize. There's an area of artificial intelligence that is probably the most sophisticated part of the world of artificial intelligence. It's called machine learning or deep learning. And what this is an area of artificial intelligence that uses a tremendous amount of signal processing power, very big computers, in order to take a lot of information that exists, a lot of data that exists, and find patterns in that data that can help somebody solve a problem. So for example, it's used a lot in medical diagnosis, where it will gather information from patients all across the country and all across the world to help healthcare providers really hone in on specific, diagnostic criteria or specific treatment options for someone who's dealing with one particular healthcare or another. And when you can grab all that data and then find a very smart way of getting through that data to look for patterns in that data, that can be very effective. And that's something that artificial intelligence, especially machine learning or deep learning, is really good at doing. Another example that everyday individuals might encounter is credit card fraud protection. I'm sure many of you have received that call or that text from your credit card company to say, are you in Alabama right now, and did you just purchase something at the local Walmart? And you say, no, that wasn't me. And they'll say, yeah, we didn't think so. It didn't match our pattern of what we expected you to be doing, and so we put a stop on that transaction, so you're protected. And the way it does it is, imagine the millions and millions of transactions that are occurring every day around this world with people using credit cards. And the vast majority of those transactions are legitimate transactions. but occasionally there's fraudulent use of credit cards. And so what ends up happening is that the big credit card companies use deep learning or machine learning to constantly monitor all this traffic that's going on in the world of commerce on an ongoing basis in real time, to be alerted to any patterns that would suggest a fraudulent behavior. When it sees those patterns, it puts up a stop sign, and it won't go through with your transactions until you approve it one way or the other. And that is a very good example of how it can take all this data, all these transactions that are going on over time, and it's learned to detect patterns that tell it one thing versus another. That's a very good analogy to what we're doing at Whisper, because the way we are using AI is that we're using this very sophisticated part of the world of AI called deep learning or machine learning. And the goal of our system and our hearing aids is to be able to track all this data that's coming through the hearing aids, meaning sound. Sound is data when you put it through a hearing aid. And there's a tremendous amount of detail in sound. The human voice has a tremendous amount of detail. All the other sounds in the environment have a tremendous amount of detail. And the job of our system and our hearing aids is to track all that information as it's coming through the hearing aid in real time and look for patterns that define the speech signal. We have trained our system after hundreds and hundreds of thousands of hours of listening to recognize the patterns that typify clean, intelligible speech, and to be looking for those patterns. And when it sees those patterns, is to protect those patterns and try to minimize other sounds that are going through the hearing aid. And it does it because of the amount of processing power we use and the sophisticated algorithms of machine learning allows us to do, to be able to look for those patterns and create that separation between speech that's coming through and other sounds that are coming through the hearing aids. And so that is core to the way we go about trying to do processing. Now, AI shows up in hearing aids in a variety of different ways. So if you've been in the hearing aid market for a while and you've been noticing things, there are mentions of AI that occur from time to time. Like, for example, one use of the world of AI is there's some hearing aids that when you're in a very noisy situation, can create a very narrow listening path for the user. And that works sometimes if that's the sort of situation where you find yourself in. But that can be a very sort of unnatural sort of listening experience to have if you're moving through space, if you're walking somewhere that happens to have noise in it. So what these companies who use this part of the world of AI do is they simply use motion detectors in the hearing aids. And if they notice that you're walking, they won't let this microphone get very narrow. That's a use of something in the world of AI, but it's not machine learning or deep learning because it's not that level of sophistication of machine learning. Another example is a couple different hearing aids. If you find yourself in a noisy situation, you can press a button on your smartphone to ask for help. And so what will then happen is the hearing aid will monitor your sound environment for a few minutes, kind of get a sense for what the acoustic situation is that you're in, send that information up to the cloud. And after a little bit, there'll be an answer back from the cloud of, well, maybe you should, maybe the hearing aid should, crank up the volume or go to a different mode of the way it processes sound or something like that. But that's not really working in real time. That's more overall, kind of overall changes that you might want in your hearing aid. It would be very similar if you've ever had a hearing aid with a button where you can turn into different programs. It would be like shifting over to another program. What we do with AI is we use it to really attack that biggest problem that most people have. It's to do sound processing in noisy environments, but do it in real time and do it basically on a speech sound by speech sound basis. So we're not talking about just overall changes to the product that would happen, about the type of room that you might be in and make that room maybe a little bit quieter, a little bit, more tolerable for you. This is talking about processing sound, basically every speech sound that's coming through the hearing aid, to be looking for those patterns that would typify what speech looks like and protect those sounds and try to suppress the other sounds that are going on in the environment. So AI could show up in a lot of different ways, but you really need a significant amount of processing power and some very sophisticated algorithms to do the machine learning or the deep learning part of the world of AI. So let's talk about what it's like to create a learning hearing system and use AI. In the Whisper hearing system, there are two basic parts to the system. The first part are the hearing aids themselves, or we call them the earpieces. That's what you're used to seeing from hearing aids. They're the small plastic devices that sit back behind your ear with a wire that goes down in your ear to a soft silicone stopper, basically, that sits down in your ear canal. We use the same sort of body type for hearing aids that most hearing aids are these days. And that those earpieces are full of very good technology, the sort of technology that defines current state-of-the-art hearing aids that you might get these days. But we have a second or a third part of our system called the Whisper Brain. And that's really what differentiates us as a company from other companies. The Whisper Brain is where we house that very sophisticated artificial intelligence-based sound processing. So the Whisper Brain, let me show you what my Whisper Brain looks like. The Whisper Brain is a third of that, and it's basically full of very powerful signal processors. And this is the sort of thing that we feel that we need in order to do that very sophisticated processing that I talked about, in order to really try to identify the speech signal and protect it and separate it out from other sounds in the environment. The Whisper Brain is a device that you can, you don't have to use it all the time. I'll talk about that in a moment. But when you're ready to use it, you turn it on, you can put it in your pocket, you can put it in your purse. You don't need to have it out. You don't have to have it around your neck. You don't have to have it on the table in front of you or anything like that. You just need to have it within about 10 feet of your hearing aids. And when the hearing aids feel that the sound environment has gotten challenging enough that someone really needs help, then it'll send the sound to the Whisper Brain, and the Whisper Brain will do the processing you need to take you to that next level of performance. As I said, you don't have to use a Whisper Brain all the time. If you're in a sort of environment, it's just quiet around your house, maybe there's one other person in the house you're talking to, or you're just watching TV or listening to something else, you typically don't need to have the brain, and the earpieces will do a fine job. Like I said, they are full of the sort of technologies that define the high end of hearing aids these days. But if you find yourself in a more challenging environment, let's say the whole family's coming over for Sunday dinner, or you decide that you're going to go to a mall, or you're going out to a restaurant with your spouse or your family, then that's exactly the sort of situation where you're going to want to make sure that you have the Whisper Brain available. Because like I said, the Whisper Brain is all about doing that very high level, very sophisticated processing that a lot of people find beneficial when they're in these very challenging environments. When we do upgrades, and I talked about the idea of doing upgrades, how we're just about to release our 5th upgrade of our 1st generation of products next week. When we do upgrades, we can upgrade a lot of different things in the hearing aid, but one of the most important things that we try to upgrade as often as possible is the sound processing using artificial intelligence, because we believe that that's the most important thing that our hearing aids do, and that's where we try to always come up with better and better versions of our AI-based solution to help patients in noisy environment. But it's not just the AI that we can improve. We can basically improve anything about the product, about the way it processes sound, and we're always on the lookout to do those upgrades. We do upgrades typically every about 3 or 4 months, and that just comes with the purchase or the leasing of the product. It's just second nature for us to want to make sure that we're always giving you our best ideas about signal processing and sending them to you into your hearing aids. And that's very different than what other hearing aid companies do. If you buy hearing aids from another company, those could be excellent hearing aids today, but they're still going to be that same hearing aid 4 or 5 or 6 years down the road until you decide you want to get another new set of hearing aids. With Whisper, you don't have to do that. You're always getting new sound processing all the time, and you are keeping up to date as much as we possibly can over time. The sort of technology differences that we have done in our product has been noticed by the technology press, and it's not just the technology magazines, you know, the very kind of geeky sort of magazines that have noticed. It's also very mainstream publications have also noticed, like the New York Times magazine, the AARP magazine, they have noticed that by having a learning system and leaning heavily into the idea of using AI, that really sets Whisper apart from what traditionally had been done by other hearing aid companies. It's one thing to know what a tech writer has written. It's another thing to hear from real users. So on your screen right now, you're seeing some testimonials from actual users of the Whisper system that we've collected over the last year. And they talk about different aspects of the product, but in general, what they're talking about is how it's affected their life, that really allows them to use their hearing in a more effective way than they've ever been able to do before. It could be something that a tech writer writes. It could be something that somebody else uses. That's all good information for you to take in. But probably the one question that's on a lot of different people's minds is Whisper right for me as an end user? Meaning, will Whisper make a difference for me personally? And the answer to that question is, I don't know. I can't answer that question because it really depends so much on what your experiences are with the product. Because of that, at Whisper, we very much encourage the idea of trial use of the product before you invest in the product. So if you decide that Whisper might be something that you're interested in, whether you're a current hearing aid user or you have never tried hearing aids before, the first thing that we encourage you to do is to take the device out for a week or two just to see how well it works for you, and not make a decision to actually commit to the product until a week or two down the line. Then once you do decide that you want to go with the product, you're still going to have another 45 days of return privilege. And that is partly due to state regulations in all states of the union, including Virginia. But also it's policy in the company, and it's policy in most providers like Dr. Wiesman's office to give you a return privilege time so that you can decide if you want to return it at any point within the first 45 days. So between the initial trial period and the 45 days, you have close to 2 months before you have to totally commit to keeping the product. And that'll be plenty of time for someone to decide whether or not it is really making a difference in their life. There's enough differences between person to person in terms of the way hearing loss affects them that there's no guarantee that one particular hearing aid is the best solution for all patients out there. And because of that, really the most legitimate way to really find out is to make sure that individuals like yourselves get an opportunity to use it and to listen to it and to see if it's going to be the sort of thing that's going to make a difference for you. So, like I said, there are two really big things that we think really set us apart as a company. The fact that this is a learning system and it does get better over time, and we've shown our commitment to being able to do these upgrades on a regular basis. And second of all, that we really feel that the best way to really take hearing aid solutions to that next level is to really tap into that world of artificial intelligence, especially the most sophisticated parts of the world of artificial intelligence. So with that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to invite Dr. Wiesman back in, and I'm going to invite Ryan back in to talk to us about whatever questions that have come in since we started the seminar. So Ryan, what do people want to know about?
Thank you, Don. As we go through the Q&A here, feel free to continue to ask questions, and we'll go ahead and address those as they come in. So let me take a look at what we have so far. Okay, the first question we'll address here is, how much does Whisper cost? Anne, do you want to take that one?
Yes, I'll jump in with this. What many of my patients were very excited about is that it did not require a huge amount of $5,000, $6,000, $7,000 upfront. The subscription plan is very affordable at $139 a month. That is done through a leasing company, and it's during the 3-year lease arrangement, $139 a month, and that includes all office visits, supplies, and there's loss and damage coverage with 3-year warranty. So it's an exclusive plan for that 3-year period. And that also has been a game changer for many patients who know that they need some help, but do not necessarily have the cash up front, as I said, to invest five, six, $6,000 up front. And they find that it's very affordable. And I know if the patients that I've worked with in the last year, I know at least 5 of them were able to improve their hearing, their quality of life, because there was a product that was affordable to them. Just earlier this morning, I had a young girl, 31 years old, um, and she's had hearing loss for several years. And while she does have health insurance through her employer, there is no hearing aid benefit. And the first thing she said to me was, I can afford that monthly. And so this is this is really exciting because the more people that we can help with hearing aids at an affordable range with the premium technology is a game changer.
Thank you, Anne. The next question we have here is, can you explain the upgrade process?
Yes, I can do that. So up till now, the way the upgrades would work is that when we released an upgrade, that you would need to go into the office in order to have your system upgraded. One of the nice things with this new upgrade is that this is the first time that we're able to introduce a new approach that that we've developed, where you can do the upgrades at home, just like when your smartphone wants to upgrade. You can do this at home, at your convenience when that is useful for you. So if you're going to do an upgrade, what you need to do is just sit down in front of your computer, and hopefully everybody has access to a computer, whether or not you have one, maybe a family member has one. And you plug your brain into the computer using the charging cable that we send with it. And you go to a website, and then you log yourself into that, and that will do the upgrades of the system. So it'll do the upgrade into the brain, and the brain will send the upgrades into the hearing piece, into the earpieces. So it becomes very convenient for you to do it at home. If you run into any problems, you can always call us. We can help you out with the technical issues. Or if there's anything about the sound quality after you've done the upgrade, where maybe it's something that you need to be updated at that point in time, then we would encourage you to go back and set an appointment to go back in to see Dr. Wietzma in order to have any updates that you would need to your fitting at that point in time. But we've been using this approach to doing upgrades in testing for quite a while, and we're quite comfortable that it's going to work really well. And so we're excited that this is a new level of patient convenience that we're able to introduce starting next week.
And I would jump in here too and add that our office is always available, and we encourage patients to come in anytime they feel that they would rather come in and see us and have us do the upgrade too for them.
Great. We'll move on to the next question here. Does everyone get the same upgrades, or are they different depending on hearing loss?
It is right now, the way we are doing upgrades is general system improvements. And so it will be the same upgrade for all patients at this point in time. As we look down the road, we expect to start doing upgrades that also include maybe some more differentiated things depending on some of the characteristics, either maybe hearing loss, maybe the way you use the product, people who are in noise more often than other people, whatever. We think that there is some room for us to start doing upgrades that are a little bit more individualized. But not to that point in time. So right now, when we talk about upgrades, we're talking about doing the same upgrade for all patients. Now, if we do some upgrades that include some of the core sound processing, the effect for any individual patient will also be related to how your hearing aids already have been set. So, so there is some individualization that already occurs because your product was fit to be very specific to you. For example, in this new upgrade, we are doing some improvements to the way the product handles acoustic feedback or whistling, which is a problem that is sort of, always around with hearing aids, and our solutions have gotten better and better as an industry over the years. And we have some great new improvements in our system at Whisper. For some people, it's not going to make that big of a difference because you may not have been dealing with a lot of feedback in your fitting so far. Other people who have been dealing with a lot of feedback may find this to be a big difference for them. And so there's an example of we can do a system-wide improvement, but it might have a bigger impact on some patients compared to others.
Thanks, Don. Next question here is, I have a set of 4-year-old Widex hearing aids. They amplify the sound fine, but not the clarity of speech. For example, watching TV programs, I have a difficult time understanding speech even without background noise. Is this something that the Whisper hearing system can help with?
Yes.
There you go. There's the answer. There's the answer. Yes, we would expect that to be the case. But again, that's what the trial use period is all about, in order to make sure.
All right. I just have one question left here, but as we finish this one out, if anybody else has anything else, feel free to ask it and we'll get to it. The next question is, what is the best way for me to try Whisper? Anne, do you want to answer that one?
Yes, I would love to jump in and answer that. I am encouraging anyone who's on the webinar today. You are invited in our office. I'd like to connect with you, to schedule a time for you and I to meet. We will do an updated hearing test and verify the level of your hearing. I have several demo systems here in the office. We will do the fitting at the time you come in. You will leave with the system. You'll take it home, and as Don said, we'll do a test run for a week or two. When you leave, there's no money up front. This is a full, free, no obligation trial. And that's really the best way to take it home and use it in your environment. And it just, I'm going to jump in here and say, because I've worked with a lot of patients in the last couple of years, in the last year with the Whisper, and I just can't stop repeating how impressed they are in the ability to understand speech in cafeteria, to be able to separate speech from noise. Many of my patients who are wearing it live in an assisted living environment, and you know that the dining rooms can get very noisy in those type of situations, including restaurants. And patients are very impressed with their ability to understand the speakers in those noisy situations. So the reason I'm doing this webinar is so that I can spread the word about how significant an improvement the technology is. And I do want to say too, also, that some of the fittings that I have done, especially new users, I wanted them to be able to experience the Whisper as well as conventional hearing aids. And I do want to say that the majority of the patients that wore both conventional hearing aids did choose the Whisper over today's conventional hearing aids. So
Great.
I think you
Thanks,
just need to
Anne.
come in and make an appointment to see me.
Sounds like a plan.
We did have one final question come in while we were discussing that, which is what happens after the 3 years?
After the 3 years, there are a couple different options that you actually have with Whisper. So one is the lease. That's what most people have been using. At the end of 3 years with the lease, you'll have a couple different options. One, you can buy out the product that would be available. Second of all, you can renew a lease for another 3 years and get a new set of hardware in order to do that. And if you don't decide on either of those options, then you'd be expected to return the device at that point in time.
Okay, thanks, Don. That looks like our last question. So I think we'll wrap up here. Thank you, everybody, for joining. We really appreciate your time. If you'd like to try Whisper, just give Dr. Ann a call. The number is on your screen there, and she'll go ahead and get you set up. So thanks, everybody, and have a great rest of your day.
Thanks for
Okay,
attending.
thank you. Thanks, everybody.